Could it be that I'm live? All right, mic test, mic testing. Yeah, cool. Okay. The last time, what happened was electricity went. Jamaica Public Service, one of the most inefficient companies here. So I had to stop at number fact 61. So we're gonna move on to fact 62. I'm sorry for the long delay, but it's worth the wait, right? If you watch the last video. And if you haven't watched the last video, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. This one, because you'd have missed 61 of 100 facts. Anyway, straight into it. Fact 62. C.A.W. Dornford, a soldier's life and work in South Africa, London, 1882, illustrates London News, 1870. C.L. Norris Newman in Zululand with the British toward the War of 1870. The New York Public Library has a file of newspaper clippings relating to the Zulu War of 1879 with abundant references to cattle whale. And the next chapter would have been slavery. Fact Devonians taken in the war originally meant people of glory. Fact 64. The transportation of white slaves to America and their sale. See James Arnell. The workers in American history, 400 Germans, of whom only 50 lived to see free America. Still another, bearing 1,500 lost, 1,100 from death on voyage. See page 64, New York, 1921. Pastor Kunze, writing at that time, said, packed like herring and sold as slaves, JB in their eyes, the law of a slave and criminal code was classed with the negro slaves and Indians, who were worked hard and dressed in cast-off clothes of their owners and might be flogged as often as their masters thought necessary. In other words, the exploiters were no respecters of slavery was a cause of racism. It was basically economics because white slaves or white farmers couldn't survive the tropical conditions of that time. The Native Americans have died of diseases, what the Europeans brought. So Irish people were also enslaved in Americans as well as Germans. Now the thing is, the indentured workers of India and the enslaved people from Africa were better able in the planter's mind to cope with the environment and handle the task. And a lot of them were skilled agricultural farmers from their homelands. And it's similar to no, you have a lot of people of African descent going on farmer programs, and a lot of people don't join those programs because they can't manage the conditions. And a lot of people from Southern Asia. So this form of work is still going on today, which is not directly classed as slavery. Point 55. For Nocturnus insurrection, see authentic and impartial narrative of the triangular events, Southampton 31. Anglo-African Magazine, Volume 1, pages 386 to 397. That's published in 1859. The word Seminole means runaway or fugitive. The Seminoles were chiefly fugitive Indians and Negro slaves and corresponded to the Maroons of Jamaica, Cuba, Haiti, and South America. They fought 3 wars with the United States. So the Seminoles were also a force against the United States because the United States is always trying to influenced the Caribbean affairs, the destabilization of countries like Grenada and Haiti, and even in Jamaica. And even in Jamaica, we're trying to have a technological agreement with the Chinese. However, we're moving on to fact 66. Act 4 Laws of Virginia, October 1670 reads, no Negro or England, though baptized and enjoying their old freedom, shall be capable of the purchase of white Christians. But, hush, but yet not debarred from buying any of their own kind. So they're basically saying that Christian blacks and Christian Indians are restricted from buying whites. However, they are allowed or permitted to buy their own race. And that's in 1670. Oh, you left it? Act 9, October 1748. No Negro mulatto says no Negro, mulatto, Indian, although Christian, or any Jew, Moor, or Mohammedan, which would be Muslims, shall purchase any Christian white servants. Statute of Louisiana, Chapter 91, 13, Section 12, March 20, 1818, forbids the same. It was not in the facts until year 1818 that the legislature of Louisiana found itself called upon to notice the frequency with which free persons of color bought white strangers, and in their tardy wisdom forbade any such further purchases on their part. However, permitted white persons of good fame and character continued to traffic. This is quoted from the Slavery Pamphlets, Volume 23, Number 15, New York Public Library. Fact 67. For the sale of what for the sale of white people as Negro slaves, the article from Cincinnati Philanthropist, reprinted in Colored Americana, June 20, 1840, where a white woman was sold as a Negro and where her 10 children, two of which were at white masters, were also sold as Negroes. For the seduction and sale of other whites as Negroes, see Anglo-American Magazine, Volume 1, page 336. This is published in 1859. Richard Heldred, American historian, says, just catch a stray Irish or German girl and sell her, and a thing sometimes done. Because the Germans and Irish were seen as less than in those times. Even today, the Irish people are looked down on by their English counterpart. And McCormack says all persons who were captured in Europe by kidnappers and sent to Americas were sold by the captains to the highest bidder without indenture. This meant they could be held slaves for life like Negroes. The story of Sally Muller, a German woman who held as a Negro, slave pamphlet, volume 23, number 15 at New York Public Library. Chambers quotes, race do not speak of race. We do not mind original color. What we assert is that slavery, whether black or white, is the regular and best condition of society. The blood of orators, generals, statesmen, even the president of the republic runs in the vein of men who are bought and sold like horses and mules. It is well known that many poor Anglo-American white children are sold as slaves. Sometimes poor whites of the South sell their children to dealers, and it is notorious that the habit of hunting white children in the states of the North are ever increasing. General Sharman wrote, I saw men and women white as purest Anglo-Saxon types sold like cattle. Ellison reported, "It is extraordinary to see slaves so white that you could not distinguish them from the white, the white of purest blood." George Fitzhugh of Virginia fought for the opinion that not only of the Negroes, but of the proletarian whites immigrated from Germany and Ireland should be sold as slaves for the reason of humanity. Cromwell ordered several thousands of Irish to be sold as slaves as slave. One in 10 I knocked on the head. The rest I sold to Barbados. So that's euphemism for saying he killed one of 10 and sold the rest to Barbados. Bondertat und Bondeskrig, page 50. We'll check out. Oh. Page 51, 1886, quoted from F. Hertz, Race and Civilization, page 328. C.M. MacIdis says of the West Indies, the white servants were often placed under black overseers who treated them with particular barbarity. As the blacks born on the island acquired the knowledge of handcraft, the white servants were compelled to do the roughest, hardest works in the field. An introduction to the economic history of the British Empire, page 31 through 5 to 35. London, 1935. For much more additional data, see chapter White People Sold as Negroes, as Negro Slaves in Sex and Race, Volume 2, 1942. Fact 68 for Universal of Famous Man, Volume 1, page 45. Fact 39. The U.S. Census of 1790 showed 195 Negro slave owners, of whom 6 were in Connecticut and New York. In 1830, there were about 4,500 Negro slave owners. In 1836, slaves owned by Negroes in New Orleans numbered 640. On Negro slave owners, seals of slaves gave the name of the slave holder. Fact 70. The British Emancipation Proclamation allowed the masters to keep their slaves as apprentices. They were not really freed until 1838. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation permitted the retention of slaves in those slave states which were fighting for the Union, as well as those parishes and counties in sympathy with him. He also excluded Tennessee, hoping that they would join the Union. So that's like appeasement. In the words of the proclamation, these states were to continue holding their slaves precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. Proclamation of January 1st, 1863. Slavery was abolished, not by the Emancipation Proclamation, but by the 13th Amendment on December 31st, 1865, 8 months after Lincoln's death. Fact 71. That both Negroes and whites were still held as slaves in North Africa is well known to those who lived in those lands. As far as Arabia, which I know little, I have had information from reliable personal sources, from one of my informants being the son of an Irish diplomat who lived until recently in Arabia with his father. Also, W.B. Seabrook relates, I have seen on the desert's edge a black Muslim slave riding, bejeweled in gold embroidered robes, among white Christian girls and women who toiled for him barefooted in the fields. My friend replied, "Stuff and nonsense, man. Though a slave was one of the richest members of the tribe, Adventures in Arabia, page 90, New York, 1928. White woman slave, one of whom might have been born anywhere north even as the English Channel, and of Sir Cassinans, of a fierceness ranging from ivory to olive, woman called Wild, page 28 to 48, New York, 1937. Amir Rashani said in 1922 and in 1928, "You have seen with your eyes even slaves and slave girls. He, the Sultan, has Christian girls also. Ask him for one, he will present one to you." And this is in the Makers of Modern Arabia, pages 52 to 53. The Sudan. See article by Captain L.H. Blood on North Africa in the New York Evening Journal, published on August 10, 1934. The next chapter, Massachusetts, 1928, with reproductions of newspaper articles. And for fact 73, it says, for a partial list of these athletes, see Negro Yearbook, 1938, 1937 to 1938, pages 14 to 18, Tuskegee Institute. And we know of the excellence that we have garnered in sports, even since the publication of this. The next chapter is that of warfare and commanders. The two greatest colored figures in the history of Islam are one, Bilal of Ethiopia, and two, Tariq bin Ziyad. He also was a slave and became a great general in Islam, and he was commander of the Moorish army which invaded Spain. Jebel ul Tariq, the mountain of Tariq, is it Jebel is it that's is the Gibraltar. That's what the Gibraltar is named after. It's named after him. One of the greatest Turkish classics is called Tariq bin Ziyad, and he was a hero to them. Morgan says this brave and fortunate Moor, said to be Musa's own slave, and renders his name immortal to all posterity. And this is in the History of Barbary and Algerians, page 160.75. Hannibal, who died with the rank of commander in chief, was a Negro brought in Constantinople. D.M. Wallace, Russia, page 270. Also, Albert Perry, Abraham Hannibal Journal, the Negro History, October 2. Point 76 says, Napoleon said at St. Helena, it would have been much more proper for Toussaint to have the division than as a criminal. Point, or should I say fact 79, Gregon Lacaste, in his life of Toussaint Louverture, names the sum as 6 million francs. He never returned the millions entrusted to his care following the events which deprived Toussaint of his liberty. This writer tells also of the litigation that followed in the courts for the money left by Gerard to the city of Philadelphia. For Gerard, Jim Crow, see J.B. McMaster, Stephen Gerard, Volume 2, page 450, Philadelphia, 1918. And Toussaint was the great general of the Haitian Revolution who defeated France 3 times. Point 78, General Pamphile Lacroix, White, who fought against Emperor Dessalines in Haiti, said Jean Francois, raised still higher recently to the rank of grandee, sailed with his officers to Spain to enjoy the favor of the courts of Madrid, where he was reserved where was reserved for him in all high honors of rank, the titles and decoration and emoluments of Captain General. De Haiti, Volume 5. Fact 80. Consult R.T. Wingate, 10 years in captivity in Mahdi Camp, London, 1892. Point fact 81. In the Philippines, the Negroes deserted in scores and for the purpose of joining the insurgents, many of them, like celebrated Fagans, became leaders and fought the white troops or their former comrades with zest and ability. Fact 82. General A. Dodd, conqueror of Dahomey and France's greatest colonial soldier, was born in Saint Louis, Senegal, West Africa, of mulatto parentage on both sides of his family. In color, he was very dark. The New York Tribune, April 17, 1910, said that he was so popular that he could have easily seized the power in France as the entire nation, respective of party or politics, turned out to welcome him, and to such an extent he did become an object of popular enthusiasm that there was no doubt that he might have easily have established himself in the role of military dictator had it not been for the loyalty to the republics. Yet it adds he wouldn't have been permitted to drink at the same bar with a white man in America. And in many years, and in many states, the Union would not have permitted him to ride in the same streetcar as the whites. General Dodd was a Grand Officer in the Legion of Honor, highest possible grade in that order. He died in 1922. Fact 83. For a double-page picture of Naval Captain Martinez and as commander of the Air Force Defense of Parish with his officers together with a summary of his work, see La Illustration of Parish, March 22, 1919, pages 319 to 327. I knew Commander Martineau personally and visited and talked with him a good deal at his home at 5 Rue France Capelle, Paris. Martineau was the commander of the Legion of Honor with the same rank held by Marshal Foch and Hatch, and General Person in that order at the same time. Fact 84, that Colonel Batista, Commander-in-Chief of the Cuban Army, is a mulatto, has several times been stated in American newspapers. For the exploits of the Negroes in early American wars, see L.E. Wicks. Fact 86. On March 26, yet unavailed force for saving the Union to J.C. Colkin. In August 26, 1836, he said, the emancipation policy and the use of colored troops to the heaviest blow yet dealt to the rebellion, and that at least one of these important successes could not have been achieved when it was but for the aid of colored troops. To John T. Mills, August 1864, the slightest knowledge of arithmetic will prove to any man that the rebel armies cannot be destroyed by democratic strategy. it would sacrifice all the white men to the north to do it. There are now in service of the United States nearly 150,000 colored men, most of them under arms, defending and acquiring the Union territory. The Democratic strategy demands that these forces be disbanded and that the masters be conciliated, what? Conciliated by restoring them to slavery. Abandon the posts now garrisoned by black men and take 150,000 men from outside and put them in the battlefields or cornfields against us, and we will be compelled to abandon the war in 3 weeks. Fact 87. It's just giving you some reference material here. So from 87 to 90, stated some reference material for the passage that just 91 to 100 is miscellaneous, meaning everything else that's unclassified. All right, so 91 says, the history of the word nigger and negrita, from which negro comes, see Sir William Smith's Dictionary of Greek Roman Geography. Black and colored, on the other hand, has no historic meaning, however, for African peoples. Blacks from the Anglo-Saxon black has most horrible meaning. See, in any large dictionary, colored as related to the Latin colare, to conceal, to color up, to paint, and thing in other than its true light. Thus, the tendency to decree Negro on the grounds that it means slavery is sheer ignorance. For instance, a Negro newspaper took a poll of its readers some years ago and they chose colored, but the Jim Crow car that is the degrader of American citizenship usually is marked colored. The majority of this paper in circulation is in the South. They chose colored so as to be in line with the Jim Crow policy. Still another paper used the raceman, which means the uninitiated. Think of racetrack. Hello? Who? Oh, we don't shop in but alright. I'll go to them. Alright. Alright, 1 second. You told me, let me go in off it again. Right. Give me a comedy day. Alright, where was it? Another very racial group chooses black, which a word said to be positively as white man's word. Of course, there is only one race, the human race. But all of these names used by stronger groups in America to set dark-skinned citizens apart, the Negro is the least objectionable. Not only in is it very ancient, but it has a record in America for centuries of fortitude and endurance and survival power, rare in the annals of mankind. Negro is making splendid progress towards prestige in such terms as Negro spirituals, Negro boxer, Negro music, Negro athlete, Negro soldier, Negro loyalty. There is not a single noted name that is not once used in contempt or is still even so used in parts of the world. Christian, Anglo-Saxon, Scotch, Irish, English, American, Yankee were all very much looked down on. Shakespeare's use of Negro deals with misconjugation, Merchant of Venice, 3 volume 42. I've dealt more at length with the subject in the article What Shall We Call Ourselves? Fact 92. For the word admiral, consult the Century Dictionary with exploits of the Blacks at seas and the Phoenicians, who roamed as far as the British Isles. The captain of pirates captured by Julius Caesar was a Negro, and so was his lieutenant. And this is basically in we talking some Negro generals at sea who were. It states that the staff of the correspondent, the DPG Colony of Paris, sent the following from Berlin, August 25th, 1931. The Negro whom William of Prussia adopted as son had just died in an insane asylum. To William the First, Beowulf's American explorer in 1865. How the emperor gave him military education. How, while engaged as an officer at the Battle of Pavina, received a wound in his head and made instantly how in turn to the asylum of Acacia, Acona, Italy, where he was completely inoffensive throughout. He suffered the delusions of grandeur. In the paintings of 1867 to 1870, one may see a supreme artistic of Anconia. Paul Coffey. Anywhere to go? Okay. Paul Coffey sailed his own ship, the Traveler, with a Negro crew and immigrants between the United States of and West Africa. So Coffee basically had his own ship and he returned some of his people to Africa. And in fact 94, and no, facts 95, 96, and I know more reference material again. And fact 98, we're just moving on to fact 98, and we'll be coming to the close of this soon. Fact 98, the Nubians or unmixed Negroes of ancient Egypt used hot irons not to straighten their hair but to arrange it in rows of small curves around their head. While the Ethiopians shaved their heads carefully, and while the Egyptians shaved their heads carefully, and the Ethiopians permitted their thick woolly hair to grow with great effort of hot iron and cosmetic to arrange tiers of curls. Fact 99. The various U.S. Census report consistently showed that Afro Americans are longer lived than white Americans. In 1900, there were 837 whites who had reached the age of 100 and over, and there were 2,555 Negroes, or 13 in favor of one, who had reached that same milestone. The final fact of this book is speaking of the parade of Negro Brotherhood in Seville, Spain in 1926, Arthur Schomburg, curator of Carnegie Library, says, it was only one human to wish to examine the garments of the Brotherhood of Negroes after observing the similarly white robes and cross used by the Ku Klux Klan of our country. To all appearance, the American organization copied the dress of those who believed in Christ, and this was like the Knights Templar. Not even the garments, it seems, the Americans ordered original. They are evidently copied faithfully from a very sacred brotherhood whose devotion won them love and gratitude of the Spanish people, from king to peasant, pontiff to believer. Today, the descendants of these Spanish Negro are quite bleached from mixing with their white neighbors. Angeles in Borough Common is still mentioned by them. Priests, guides, and others in civil informed me that the garb that is exactly like that of centuries ago. For earlier information on these negritos, as they're called in Seville, see Zungia Annales de Sevilla, published in Madrid, 1677. Later, the Negroes rose to a position of after whom one of the streets, Negroes then coincidentally is really amazing. So if the KKK didn't copy these, so and those are the and those are the 100 facts. So we came to the end of the video. There's also a lot of great snippets, a lot of great facts that's left out of these parts that even but I like that for another video. So we've completed 100 parts, and part three, there's like say 20 more pages left in the book. So I hope this one was informative and not too long and drawn out.